Rick Stengel, I have to start with you because I wrote that, I read it on the teleprompter, but hearing it out loud, it is impossible for it to sort of sink in that we're talking about the news in America. These are headlines that you're used to reading in a third world country. How did we get here?
Well, by the way, we need election observers in America, which is the kind that we used to send to other people. You know, I want to talk about, yes, unraveling our institutions is what authoritarians do. Donald Trump is trying to do that. But I'm so glad you mentioned Congress coming back, because I just want to put a little historical context. The postal power is an enumerated power in the Constitution in Article 1 that is given to Congress. Congress needs to use it. Mail-in ballots have red and blue voters, and I'm so glad they're coming back now, because one of the ways that we undermine Trump's ability to undermine our institutions is institutions like Congress functioning. So I'm glad they're coming back. I'm glad Nancy Pelosi has summoned them, and I'm glad they're suing the federal government, because the federal government basically is a custodian for the Postal Service, which Congress operates.
There's so much to unpack there. I want to put a pin in the political conversation, because I'm told that Bill Stepien, the new campaign manager, is out of his mind, a word I can't say on TV, that Trump is undermining the mail-in vote writ large, because Trump needs a lot of mail-in vote. All members of the military vote by mail. A lot of people in states that Trump would need to vote for him vote by mail. I want to go, though, to the other development and the other sort of historical echo with you, Jason. I think I was in one of these studios here when Jim Comey very reluctantly entered in a pretty large way into the 2016 election. You now have, with Congressman Jeffrey's letter, a request for Christopher Wray to do the same thing, enter into the 2020 election in a pretty big way and investigate whether actual statutes have been violated. Let me put them up. I know none of us is a postal law scholar here, but it's worth examining whether Donald Trump has so dismantled every institution, including his own FBI, that they can't look for crimes where crimes may exist, Jason.
Yeah, this is why this is so problematic, and we've been talking about this for a long time. When Trump first got into office and he attacked the CIA and he attacked the FBI, we were concerned. On your show, Nicole, and several others, said, gosh, he's really attacking the morale. But that was just the beginning. First, the morale, then was forcing out or pressuring out or outright firing the people who would care about the integrity of institutions. And then it became moving in his cronies. And whether that was initially getting rid of Comey or every single other person, Donald Trump has tried to make every single branch of the government just an arm of his own desire to stay in office. And here's what's really dangerous. Whether we're talking about the FBI, we're talking about the CIA, we're talking about the post office. Think about this. 3 years ago, we never would have thought the post office would have mattered. It would have been the last thing we were concerned about, the FBI. It just goes to show, when you have a dictator come to power, or an attempted dictator come to power, there is no such thing as an unimportant government agency. There is no such thing as a superfluous government agency, because everything can be weaponized when you have someone whose only goal is to stay in power and not serve the people.
And AB, if you have to look at the way Donald Trump has grown into the job, I hate that expression, he's grown into what Jason just described. He's grown into an understanding of how to use it, to bend it, to corrupt it to his political will. Here are the laws governing the Postal Service, the questions law enforcement will have to ask to see if there's any, probable cause to investigate whether crimes were committed. Whoever knowingly and willfully obstructs or retards the passage of mail, or any carrier of conveyance carrying the mail, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 6 months or both. Whoever, being a person employed in any administrative position by the United States or any department or agency thereof, uses his official authority for the purpose of interfering with or affecting the nomination or the election of any candidate for the office of president shall be fined under this title or imprisoned. Donald Trump has done both, but far less grammatically correct on Twitter in the last 5 days.
Yes. Nicole, looking back at all of the times we saw him push and push and push to test whether or not he would get phone calls from Republican leaders which we would find out about later and not in the moment, urging him to stop. That was the education process for him in 2017, 18, and 19. And in 2020, at the end of 2019, he basically extorted a country using congressionally approved funds, appropriated funds that were meant for that country's security. It is an impeachable offense, what he did, and the Congress ceded its separation of powers and its responsibility to hold him to account. And from that point forward, we knew on February 5th what Donald Trump would do the rest of the year, because no one has told him to stop. Yes, it is true that tampering with an election is a crime, slowing the mail is a crime. I don't know that the FBI is going to come up with actual crimes here. But if you think about how politically destructive this is for the president, he did not wait till the end of September or middle of October. He brazenly told us last week he was doing this to undermine balloting, getting into the mail service and being counted, which might help him get defeated. And this, people are watching what are called cost-cutting measures and seeing that if shelving is removed and machines are removed and their corner sidewalk mailbox is removed, that is not an administration trying to help its citizenry either vote or survive a pandemic. I just don't know how this does not boomerang on him in the weeks to come.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.